Hello! So I'm guessing that from the title, from my amazing t-shirt and also from the images behind me that you've all guessed I'm going to be talking about The Hobbit. So I've been an avid fan of Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings since I was about 9 years old. My mum used to read the books to me when I was younger, but I never really kind of grasped the whole concept until I saw the movies. Then when I was a little bit older I began to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy myself, and I read The Hobbit, and then obviously I've seen the Hobbit films. So I'm giving myself the right to have an opinion, which of course we're all allowed an opinion anyway. Now I'm going to try and keep this brief because I could talk forever and a day about Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit in general. So now that we've all been graced with the presence of the final instalment of The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies, I'm going to talk about the films as a whole. The same as I'm going to refer back to Lord of the Rings as a whole. This little man is ruining everything. You're spoiling it all! You're spoiling it all! Go away, fiend. And I'm guessing that from my kind of explanation you already know that I'm an avid Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings fan. So for me it was very much a kind of a let's all compare The Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings films. So I fall into the category of I've seen Lord of the Rings and I was a little bit disappointed with The Hobbit. But don't shoot me, because there were elements to the film that were just absolutely phenomenal. The acting was spot on. I mean, Richard Armitage was just born to play Thorin. Martin Freeman played an excellent Bilbo. The dwarves each had, ouch, the dwarves each had their own qualities. But I felt that in Battle of the Five Armies the story really strayed away from the dwarves and they kind of became supporting characters as opposed to, you know, people who were on this quest with Bilbo and Thorin and Gandalf. I really liked the ties with Lord of the Rings. For example, at the end when Ian Holmes' Bilbo is sitting in the kitchen at Bag End and Gandalf knocks on the door and then it just rolls right into Lord of the Rings and it's just like it was meant to be. It was meant to be! Yes, it was! I really liked the return of Legolas despite him not being in the book and looking about 30 years older. It was really nice to see Orlando Bloom back. Legolas was never really a huge character in The Lord of the Rings, and so it was nice to see him kind of develop into his own kind of character. Just a really nice kind of moment for me was when you could tell all of Orlando Bloom's acting experience over the 11 years that in between Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, just tell that he was a more experienced actor, and I thought that was really nice. Things that didn't impress me so much in the trilogy. Stop eating my face. Visuals. Peter Jackson generally has this wonderful thing that he does with his visuals, which we see an awful lot of in the Lord of the Rings. He uses screenplay techniques that are so stupidly simple, but they're really effective. For example, in the scene in Minas Tirith when Shadowfax rears up, ouch, that's my face, when Shadowfax rears up and pushes the Steward of Gondor onto the bed that's burning where Faramir was. A lot of people would have just CGI'd in the fire, but they built two identical sets, and one had the horse, the riding double, and it had Faramir on and Pippin, and the other set just had the fire, and they strategically placed a mirror in between the camera and the sets so that the fire reflected through the mirror back down the camera and it looked like it was burning. Such a simple thing to do, but it was just so effective and it was real. Kind of carrying on with that point throughout, scale doubles were used. They employed a lot of scale doubles so that all the hobbits had hobbit-sized scale doubles and all the normal people had extra large scale doubles, who I think probably just Tall Paul played most of the other people, but that was so that they didn't have to green screen people in, they didn't have to CGI anybody, again, which all just adds to the realness of it. Everything is real. All the baddies in Lord of the Rings were all prosthetics, so, you know, Gothmog, the Witch King, Lurtz in the first movie, all the orcs in Uruk-hai, they were all prosthetics, which, again, they were real. You know, whereas in The Hobbit, a lot of all the baddies, I think every single one of them was CGI'd, which I felt that, you know, they could have done better than that. I mean, Gothmog is a really tricky character. You know, he could have either looked really awesome, which he did, or he could have looked completely shocking. You know, they made the effort and they all did a really good job, and I don't know why they couldn't have carried that consistency out in The Hobbit. In Lord of the Rings also all the sets were built as miniatures, so everything, Minas Ithil, Minas Tirith, Helm's Deep, Minas Morgul, even the Paths of the Dead, they were all built as miniature sets. They were all actually built as a scale double, so that, like, in the first movie when I think it's Gandalf stood at the top of the tower and the camera actually comes all the way down the tower of Isengard and swoops down to the caves underneath where they're farming the Uruk-hai, that was a miniature. They filmed that with a tiny camera down the side of a building that was actually built. The buildings were physically there, they physically did them. It just feels to me that Peter Jackson set such a high standard for Lord of the Rings. Like, the standard of those movies, visual-wise, were epic, and they were way ahead of their time, and even now I don't think I've seen a movie that visually has been as amazing as Lord of the Rings, and I feel that he set that standard so high. Why didn't he continue it? Lastly, from book to script, let's face it, Peter Jackson just took Tolkien's idea of The Hobbit and made it into a movie, which is fine. We all understand that when you take things from books and from novels, it's very difficult. Sometimes it can be really, really hard to adapt them into film, and Tolkien actually said it would never be a film. He just said it wouldn't be done. He said it couldn't be done. We proved him wrong, but I did feel the story was a little kind of disjointed in places. I like the theme of love in it, with Tauriel and Killy, I think. You know, and I said before, I like the fact that Legolas was in it, but I do think that the story, I do think there are a couple of elements in there that could have been enhanced upon more. Certain things like the love scene, that kind of just felt a little bit like, I thought more could have come of that. Maybe that's why Legolas hated the dwarves so much, you know, I don't know. But then again, Thranduil obviously had some ish with Dane, so, you know, maybe it's just a cultural thing. So yeah, on the whole, I enjoyed the film. Of course I enjoyed the film, and it's really sad now, again, because I remember that feeling that everybody got when Return of the King ended, and it was like the end of an era. 10 years later, they brought out the Hobbit. Now it just feels like that whole journey's over again. So there you have it. It's the end of another era, sadly, and you know, it'll always stay close to my heart. It'll always be very, very close in my heart. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of review chat thing, you know, and if you are a Lord of the Rings fan or a Hobbit fan, if you found it, you know, useful, and if you disagree with anything I've said, then feel free to voice your opinions too, because everybody is entitled to opinion. Thanks too from Elton. He's been very naughty, and I expect you've heard his tinkly bells. Your tinkly bells are tinkling, the bells ring out for Christmas Day. I'll see you very soon.